My name is Charlie and I'm a caffeine addict. Last time I talked about my effort to limit caffeine in order to get more of the benefits that we traditionally associate with caffeine, namely energy. Energy is the ultimate scarce resource, and if we can find ways to manage it better, then every area of our life can get better. Not to mention our sleep, which caffeine can easily disrupt, and the tendency towards impatience that I find goes along with getting buzzed on too much caffeine. So I've been limiting to matcha for a time, but I hinted at the fact that it might not be long before I start slipping into the harder stuff. And sure enough, I might have come down here and used a little bit of that espresso magic that seems to be, just gives that extra, that more. And that's the hallmark of these addictive substances, is that we just find we want more. It's never enough, is it? And so that recommends in favor of abstaining altogether. But if you can manage it, if your life is not unmanageable, you can try some of these lesser remedies, like cutting back or just switching over to something like a green tea. Matcha is my preferred morning beverage because it's easy to make. Just add a little bit to a bit of hot water, and I like to put it in ice with a little bit of cream. And it's strong enough. You can titrate the dose to be just how you want it, however strong you prefer. Whether that's a little bit of powder and it's a kind of light green, or a whole lot of powder and it's a dark green. Green tea also has certain benefits over coffee, namely that it doesn't inhibit the absorption of calcium or iron like coffee does. It also doesn't hinder bone density as caffeine from coffee does. So these are just a few reasons to consider switching over to tea. If you are a coffee lover, don't fear. I'm not telling you that you have to give up coffee altogether. I'm just saying that there's this paradox that sometimes you can get more of the effect that you want with a smaller dose. So again, it comes back to this idea of hormesis, where there's kind of an optimal range where it's beneficial, but past that range it can be toxic and even desensitizing to your system. So it takes a bigger and bigger dose just to get the same amount. I don't know if you can relate to the experience of pressing harder and harder on the accelerator but not going any faster. That's what's happening when we're just putting back one cup of coffee after another. So I kind of like to stay in this place where I'm always limiting caffeine, always aware of it, but giving myself room to find that hormetic zone. Thinking of caffeine not as a daily fix, but as a hormetic stressor that can help me out in times when I need to power through something, come up with ideas, and I find it particularly helpful for writing. So I'll be curious to hear what you use it for, whether you have certain habits that you fall into that are ideal, or if you think that your using is less than ideal. And I also talked a little bit in my last email about this historical episode of the Siege of Vienna, which I think is a fascinating story that illustrates a lot of what I'm talking about at the macro level, where you have the invading Ottoman Empire. They bring in these big bags of coffee. The Europeans don't even know what it is or what to do with it after they leave. But initially, they successfully take hold of the city of Vienna. And for a brief time, the king there of Vienna is isolated from his troops. And he needs to relay a message to them that the backup is coming in the form of the Polish cavalry led by King John Sobieski III. In order to do that, though, he needs to send someone through the enemy lines, and so they find a guy who has spent some time as a prisoner of war in a previous conflagration. And this guy, he knows the language, he knows the customs, he knows how to dress, and he runs back and forth, sending the message to the troops, just hold on, just keep fighting a little bit longer, we've got backup coming. Don't surrender. And meanwhile, the Ottomans are camped out there. They're probably drinking coffee, starting to rest on their laurels a little bit. And all of a sudden, King John comes in and routs them. They leave behind all this coffee, and no one knows what to do with it except for that same emissary who had spent time among the Ottoman people and saw that they drank it as this beverage, this sort of stimulating and intoxicating drink. So what does he do? He sets up a coffee stand, and that's how we get Viennese coffee. It's also how we get the croissant, the crescent roll, which is a symbol of the defeat of the Ottoman Muslims. So whatever you take from the story might not be exactly what I take, but I think that the Ottomans were strung out from too much caffeine. They had this initial burst, much like the Nazis during the Blitzkrieg with their newfound methamphetamine drug, the speed that kept them pushing forward. So it's you don't have to see this as a perfect analogy to get what I'm driving at, which is that coffee, beyond a certain point, can be counterproductive. It can even make us do the kinds of things, kind of work that we don't truly desire in our heart of hearts. Whereas when we scale it back, we can listen a little bit more for that still small voice that's trying to speak to us about where we should be spending our time. So I recommend give a week a try where you just drink green tea. It has powerful antioxidants. It also contains catechins, which are an antimicrobial agent. So, people are talking about the coronavirus. I guess that's a microbe. Doctors, tell me if I'm wrong. But caffeine, it's not all bad. I don't mean to say that. It can help. For me, I said it helps with my writing, helps with creativity, and it also protects against certain neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. I might be predisposed to that, so I'm particularly keen to avoid it. And then lastly, find out whether you're a fast metabolizer of caffeine or a slow metabolizer. You can do a 23andMe test and find out whether you produce this enzyme that makes you fall into the category of people who can drink it all day, no problem. Doesn't have a particularly strong effect on them, or if you're a slow metabolizer where it really can mess you up, can give you jitters if you drink too much. So just find that balance, find your hormetic zone. Let me know how it goes.